There is a lot of economic uncertainty in the world right now. And in fact, there are a lot of economists who think that we might be headed into a recession over the next 6 to 12 months. Now, I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but it got me thinking about Lego. Now, Julia and I, we've collected Lego for about 40 years when it comes to the sets that we had when we were kids and all the way through adults. And we've had some times when money is very, very tight. So we wanted to share some tips that we've learned about how to collect Lego when we're in a recession or when money is tight so that you can get the most out of your Lego budget moving forward. At the end, after we give you those tips, we'll actually share our story of some of the things that we've done and when we've done them and how it worked out for us. The first few tips are going to focus on how you can get the most out of your collection without spending any money. And then after that, we're going to focus on tips that will help you if you are able to spend some money. So let's first dive into tip number 1, which is to go ahead and rebuild old sets. I know a lot of adults who collect Lego oftentimes will build sets, put them on display, and leave them there for a long time. Maybe you take sets apart, but you put them into bags, or you put them back in the original boxes, or if it's like me, you would put them in your collection. And that's well and good, but I think there are a lot of really cool sets out there that we have in our collections that we can pull out and build and get a lot of enjoyment out of them. I'll give you a couple examples from our own situation. When we started this YouTube channel, decided to go back and build some of our old castle sets from the 1980s. Something we could do together as a family, and we could put them together in one big display, and it was a lot of fun. And then once we were done, we took them back apart. We also took apart all of our modular buildings at one point in time, and then realized, I think it'd be cool to have a modular city. So we rebuilt all of those. So whatever it may look like, small sets, large sets, sets from your childhood, sets from your adulthood, they can all be rebuilt at some point and be a great family activity. Likewise, tip number 2 is to take the pieces that you have and build other things out of them. Now, I know a lot of people don't have a ton of time necessarily to build, and you build in small stages, and building sets is a great way to do that. But what I would recommend is challenging yourself to build small mocks. And these are things you can do with your family in an afternoon, or set a time limit like you might see in Lego Masters, right? We have an hour or 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and we want to build this little vignette or something like that. Last summer, Autumn and I decided we wanted to build some new gear and boats and a little keep for the new castle factions that came in the Lego vending machine. So we got out our pieces and made sure that it was going to be a small build, nothing too large, and something that we could accomplish in a reasonable amount of time. And to be honest, it was a lot of fun, and it made me realize that you don't have to build with super complex techniques. Just put pieces together, build something that you enjoy, that you and your special ones are happy with, and go on from there. Tip number 3 involves using some technology. And I know that's maybe a taboo thing for a lot of people. I personally don't love technology when it comes to Lego. I like to be able to use my mind or use paper instructions, but there are times when using some digital platforms can help you. For instance, you may not have a lot of up-to-date pieces in your collection. It could be an older collection, or you might have all of your newer sets on display. Well, there are programs like Studio that's done through Bricklink that can allow you to build whatever you want with the part selection that is up-to-date based on the latest version, and oftentimes includes almost all of the brand new pieces that Lego produces. And it's a great way for you to learn how bricks can fit together, legal versus illegal building techniques, and honestly, build whatever you want to and see what you can come up with. We've used this a couple of times on our channel, mainly building alternative models for the Botanical Gardens for the Friends line, as well as our Guarded Inn. So we've used that a couple times to put out some instructions, and I'll put those links in the description below if you want to check those out. But it is a fun platform, and you can build small things, even big things in those programs. And so it's definitely worth checking out if you want to explore what you can do with Lego bricks. The 4th tip is to use some small expenditures to improve how you get stuff out of your collection. One of the ways you can do this is by using Rebrickable.com. If you aren't aware, Rebrickable is a website that has a bunch of instructions that users like you or I can upload to the website that will be mocks, or even taking parts from a set that exists and creating something different out of that. We recently did a video on the King Mir's castle using 3 copies of the Medieval Horse Knight's Castle. Originally, we had purchased those 3 copies to build all of the models of that set, the Creator 3-in-1, but wanted to get something additional out of it, so we've done a couple of Rebrickable models there. There are lots of models out there for Castle and Pirate and Town and City and all across the spectrum of Lego sets and offerings over the years. And so it's worth exploring that because many times these instructions are pretty affordable. They may cost as little as a few dollars all the way up to $15, $16, which is what we paid for the King Mirror's instructions. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a caveat that some of those builds that we've done in the past aren't always super strong. They're nice, they're clever, they look really good, but there could be some issues with strength and stability when you build the set. But that's okay. Like sometimes they might be a little bit hard to understand what's going on, but you can figure them out. And really, it's a cheap way to get something additional out of your collection. The 5th tip that I have is to make very small Bricklink orders. Bricklink is a great repository for pieces as well as the ability for people to purchase pieces. And one nice thing about it is that you can order whichever pieces you want and you can look for the best deals that you can, including good deals on shipping. Some stores will have promotionals where they'll have free shipping orders over a certain amount of money. And you'd be surprised at how many pieces you can get when you can find the right deal. Now, I do want to caution you that if you spread out orders across a bunch of different Bricklink stores, that shipping and handling can add up. But one thing that I did quite a bit when I was younger and didn't have a lot of money was to use Bricklink and order a few pieces every single month to get my collection to grow and I could build some of the things that I wanted to build. Tip number 6 focuses on heading out to the Lego store, and that is to find some pick-a-brick pieces that you want and fill up some cups and have a competition or some sort of building challenge with you and your family. You know, it's actually pretty economical to get pieces off of the pad wall at Lego stores. We've done a couple of videos where we highlight just how much value you can get with the pieces in the pick-a-brick wall. The trick is finding pieces that you know you are going to use. And if you buy just a bunch of pieces that never get built, you're kind of wasting your money. But what's fun about this is you can plan before you go to the store with maybe your wife, kids, partner, whoever, and you can set aside a competition or some sort of challenge that says we're going to use only pieces from the pick-a-brick wall. So when we go and we're pulling pieces, we need to keep in mind that we need to use a lot of these pieces in whatever it is that we come up with. And you can start identifying what you might want to build based on the pieces you see on the pad wall. There's, of course, some modifications you can make to this challenge that might help you build some better things and make some mocks that are more interesting. Like you could say, we'll use the parts we get from the pad wall and we'll choose a couple of different pieces that we might use from our own existing collection. Could be modified bricks or plates or tiles or something like that, depending on what you're thinking you might want to build. But it's a lot of fun, and we've done this challenge a number of times on our YouTube channel, especially early on when we weren't monetized and we wanted to get the most out of the pieces that we were able to get. Now, tip number 7 is going to get into actually buying sets. And I think it's really important that as finances get tighter, that you prioritize your sets and which ones you want to buy and get the ones that only matter the most to you. One of the things that's really fascinating about Lego in 2026 and really in the post-COVID era is that they are always releasing sets and they're always targeting different audiences. But of course, those audiences can overlap. I like, for instance, Lord of the Rings. And so any Lord of the Rings set's going to pique my curiosity. I also like the Marvel modulars or the DC modulars. I like some of the Speed Champion sets. There are a lot of themes that I really enjoy. And that means there are a lot of sets that I see and I'm like, ooh, I want to get that. But I've had to learn over the years, and especially when we didn't have much money, that I had to prioritize a couple of sets each year, save up for those, get those, and then whatever else I was able to afford was a bonus on top of that. Now, for me, it was always the modular building, finding some way to get that as birthday, Christmas gift, or save up my money over the span of 9 to 12 months so that I could afford that set. But prioritizing that set meant that I had to say no to a lot of other sets, and ultimately, I'm glad that I did because I am fortunate to have all of the Lego design modular buildings that have ever been released. So that's a real positive, and it's something that is kind of cool when you look back over time of prioritizing sets, even when money was tight, because you know you got the sets that you like the most. Now, at the same time, when you prioritize sets, I think it's worth identifying which ones you're willing to get, but also what price you're willing to pay for them. For instance, we see a lot of leaks that are released every now and again, and people will say, well, that's a large set, but I'd only spend $300 on it. Like we'll just say it's the large Pokemon set. It's $650 retail price, but I'd spend $300. Well, okay, that might be true, and good luck finding it at that price. But it's important to have that price where you'd say, you know what, I would get it at that level. I have this amount of money and I'm willing to pay it. For a lot of sets, it might mean 20, 25, or 30% off. And you know what? Setting that price and that standard is important because it's communicating to yourself what you're willing to spend on any given Lego set that you think you might want to get. So even if it might be an out of this world kind of price, this deal that's absolutely incredible, that's okay. Set it and see what happens. Along those lines, tip number 8 is to find creative ways to get sets on sale. Now, sometimes this could include looking at Facebook Marketplace and finding sets there. It could be using Amazon or finding some other way to identify when sets go on sale. But when you've set that price, like we said in tip number 7, of what you're willing to pay for the sets that you most want, then it's a matter of waiting for those prices to actually get that low. So don't go out necessarily on day one just because you want that set, but find the best deal that you possibly can. Now, along those lines, there are definitely tools that are out there that can help you get the best price. For me, I use a couple of different ones. Amazon is something that I look at, but I use it through brickset.com because what it actually does is it ties to your wish list you have on Brickset and will tell you which of those sets are available on Amazon for a discount. So you're able to see what that price is and if it meets that criteria for what you're willing to spend. Also, if you do go to Amazon or other websites, you can check out the price history of a particular set to see how much it's been discounted in the past. And that can help you set a gauge for what you might be willing to pay for that set or if it would actually be possible to hit that price. Of course, there are other retailers and other ways to get sales out there that might be specific to your country. I have stumbled on one, and it's thanks to our friends over at Slapshot Bricks. They kind of keyed me in on this one, and it's brickeconomy.com, which does a great job of showing you when sets retire, the trend of the value in sets and even themes, but also when sets are on sale. In fact, they've got a huge listing of sets that are on sale for what they believe is a good price, and it's definitely worth checking out. Now, I will also ask that if you know of a great tool available to you in your country, wherever you're at, put it in the comments below because it might help some other people out there get sets at great prices. Tip number 9 focuses on the ability to sell Lego. Now, we all know that there are sets that we could probably sell from our collection to bring in funds to buy new sets. And a lot of people do that. In fact, I was talking to a couple of my students over the last year or so, and that's what they do. They'll get sets and they'll have them on display. And at some point, they kind of get tired of them and they want some new ones. So they sell the old ones on eBay and then buy the new ones. And that's a great model. There are, of course, other ways to sell Lego to help make up the cost of sets. So one way would be to sell gifts with purchase. Some of them go for a pretty penny, especially early on in the release cycle. For example, the Restaurants of the World Japan, the sushi restaurant, that was available in early March. Now, immediately, a couple of days after it was available, on Bricklink and eBay, you saw prices routinely hit $35 to $40 US. Now the price on Bricklink has settled down to about $30, which is about what I would expect it to be, but you can still offset your $180 spend if you were at Lego by getting the 5% on insider's points, but also selling the gift with purchase. Now, that may not recoup all of the money, but it does recoup some of the money. And so if you have set a budget and you don't want to go over that budget in the long run, but you could say in the short run, I'll go over so that I can sell that gift with purchase. Now, another thing that you can sell is the minifigs from a set. A lot of minifigs, especially those that are exclusive or more rare, will fetch a pretty steep price on the secondary market after they're released. And honestly, I don't have any problem doing that. I've never done that, but I know a lot of people who have because they like the pieces and they're fine with getting rid of the minifigs. And there are people out there who want those minifigs. So you could recoup some of the cost of your set by selling off just the minifigs. Now, does this require more work? Yeah, it does. But I think you can do that work and you'll see the benefits of that by getting more money back from when you spend Lego, and it offsets the cost. That may not offset the entire cost, but it definitely makes it more budget friendly. The last tip I have is that you could always start a YouTube channel or some sort of social media website that helps you recoup some of the costs. You know, we did that 5 years ago when we started this YouTube channel because we knew that Lego was getting expensive. And honestly, we wanted to be able to subsidize our ability to afford this hobby. We didn't want to take any money out of our normal family budget. So this was the way that we felt that we could continue to buy Lego. And I'm glad we did. I'm going to tell you more about that as we tell you our story. Now, as I tell you our story, you're going to hear a lot of the tips that we've mentioned in the first part of this video. So definitely understand that we have learned this by doing. Now, for both Julia and I, we started building with and playing with Lego when we were kids. For me, it was when I was 3 years old, which means that I've been doing this for 40 years. When I was a kid, I always wanted to build with Lego when I was bored of playing, Monopoly with my older brother, or if it was a rainy day outside in the summer. And so we had a lot of time to build. In fact, anytime Christmas rolled around, we would oftentimes binge build our Lego sets because even though we didn't have a ton of them, it kept us busy. And once we were done with those, we had a few days to play with them before hopefully they got supplemented with new Lego sets for Christmas. Of course, when we weren't building those sets or playing with them, we were building our own things. We built lots of castles and pirate forts and towns, and it was a blast. And what it taught us was the versatility of Lego, that even though the building techniques were fairly rudimentary, you could still do a lot of things with Lego. And that is instilled in me. And to this day, I like to think about different ways that we can build things, which is why the building experience of a Lego set is something I value quite a bit. Now, when I was about 10 years old, 10, 11 years old, I actually entered into what you would call the dark ages. For about a dozen years, I didn't do a lot with Lego. I knew I had it. I still liked my Lego. I kept them and I moved them with me as I went from Cleveland, Ohio to Norman, Oklahoma for graduate school. But I didn't really touch Lego much again until after Julie and I got married. And there was a point in time when we got back into Lego, and at that point, we were pretty poor. I was a graduate assistant making barely any money, and I had fees to pay for, and Julia was a first-year teacher in Oklahoma. If you want to Google how much first-year teachers in Oklahoma make today, know that it was even less back then. And so money was very tight. We were trying to pay off student loans. We had rent, we had food, car insurance, all those different things that we had to adjust for as a young married couple. And so what I ended up doing is to collect Lego, I bought either small sets or I would have a small Bricklink order. And $15 to $20 would be the max that I would set. What I did to help me with that is I set a goal. I didn't just go on Bricklink and order whatever pieces I wanted. Instead, I set a goal for I want to be able to build the old classic castle sets from the 80s and 90s. I loved that theme when I was a kid. You all know that I love castle. So what I did is I put together a huge spreadsheet of all the 1x2 bricks and 1x3 bricks and all those stuff that I needed in all the colors so that I could build them. And slowly but surely, I would add pieces to my collection. And over a couple of years, despite not having a lot of money, we were able to get a lot of those pieces by finding good deals on Bricklink and getting them in small chunks. Now, of course, things got a little bit better financially when I got a full-time job. And I was able to spend a little bit more on Lego because we didn't have kids yet. We were both working full time. And it helped us not only save for down payments on house, but yeah, we were able to get a bit more Lego. And that was great. But when we moved back to where I'm from here in Northeast Ohio, we actually took a significant pay cut. Julie decided that she would stay home with then our only child before we had our second. And I was the bread earner in the family. And I actually made more money than I did when I was in Oklahoma, but collectively, it was actually significantly less. And so money was pretty tight. So we were always looking for good deals, finding some discounts, as well as buying some of the smaller sets and finding some additional funds through other projects that maybe would allow us to get some additional Lego. But we were always prioritizing which sets we wanted and which ones we wanted to add to our collection, like I mentioned earlier with the modular buildings, so that we could get those. And anything else after that ended up being gravy. Now, of course, in 2021, we saw the trend that Lego was going through, more sets for adults at higher price points. And that's when we decided to start the YouTube channel. And by starting the YouTube channel, it actually forced us to really think about how we spend our money on Lego, which meant we had to prioritize sets even more. We also had to find better deals, and we also wanted to be able to experiment with other things in our collection or online to help us get the most out of our pieces. And that's where we experimented with Studio and found a way to use that in some of our videos, or building small mocks. Yeah, we did some large ones like that big castle behind me, but not everything was big. A lot of things were really small, and we'd have fun doing it. And we would take sets like the Lion Knight's castle, take it apart, build something fresh, different with it, and then put it back together. And so we were able to get the most out of our Lego pieces when we were a small YouTube channel, not even monetized, and trying to find additional funds outside of our normal family budget to support a growing channel. Now, since we've been able to grow the channel, thanks to you all, we've been able to afford some more Lego. And that has allowed us to do more things with what we have. But that's the benefit of starting something like a YouTube channel and taking that risk. So I want to encourage you that if you are interested in doing something like that, go for it. There's no harm in trying it. Make sure, though, you do it in a way that is financially responsible. So that's our story, and I hope you noticed a lot of the different tips that we have in our video that we used throughout our time as Lego collectors. If you've got additional tips, go ahead, place them in the comments below. I'd love to see what you all have come up with over time, because I know for a lot of us, we do this as a hobby, and it is rather expensive, so we're always trying to budget our funds wisely. Thanks for watching, and always remember to keep building together.